Have you ever heard of a road that only exists when the clock strikes 12? Imagine walking through the woods in daylight, nothing but trees, dirt, and silence. But when midnight comes, a hidden trail appears. Locals say it leads deep into the forest, to a place no one has ever truly returned from. Some who dared to follow it claim they heard whispers guiding them. Others say the path itself shifted under their feet. And the strangest thing, the trail is never in the same place twice. One night it might open near a lake, the next near a hollow tree, but always, only at midnight. This is the terrifying legend of the forest trails that appear only at midnight. A story stitched together from real accounts, forgotten folklore, and eerie testimonies of those who claim they have seen it. We're going to walk down that trail together. The legend of the Midnight Trails begins in a small mountain town. Locals whisper about it, but never openly. They say the forest has always been alive, watching, waiting. Generations of families warned their children, never walk past the tree line after dark. At first, these warnings sounded like simple superstitions, but the strange disappearances gave the myth a darker weight. Hikers, campers, even hunters, gone without a trace. Their tents left untouched. Their cars still parked on the roadside, but they themselves vanished. Search parties went out, combing through every inch of the woods. Dogs refused to enter certain areas, whimpering at something unseen. And then, one by one, the rescuers began reporting something uncanny. A dirt path where no map showed one. It twisted deeper and deeper into the woods, lined with trees that seemed almost identical. Some volunteers followed it for a short distance, only to find themselves looping back to the same point, as if the forest had rearranged itself. Others swore that the trail ended in an open clearing, only to turn and find that the clearing was gone. But what chilled them most was this. Every one of those paths disappeared with the sunrise. No trace, no footprints, nothing. The first written record of the trails comes from 1962. A man named Harold Whitman, a logger who worked near the mountains, wrote about it in his journal. Harold was practical, not the kind of person who believed in ghost stories, but his words painted a chilling picture. He claimed that one night, while returning from work late, he saw a faint pathway lit by the moon. It was narrow, cutting through an area of forest that should have been untouched. Curious, Harold followed it, described the sound of footsteps, not his own, echoing just a few feet behind him. Every time he turned, the trail was empty. The sound continued. Harold said the air grew colder with every step, his breath visible though it was the middle of summer. Finally, the path ended at a massive oak tree, its trunk hollow and gaping like an open mouth. From inside, he heard whispers. Not one voice, but many, layered over each other, chanting in a language he could not understand. Terrified, Harold ran back the way he came. But when he reached the road again, the trail behind him was gone. Only the forest remained, silent and still. Harold's journal was found after his death years later, hidden beneath a floorboard in his cabin. The last line he ever wrote was this: "If you see the trail, do not walk it twice." By the late 1970s, the disappearances could no longer be ignored. At least a dozen people were reported missing near the forest. The police files from that time are thin, but the testimonies of survivors paint a disturbing picture. Yes, survivors. Because a few people actually came back, but they never returned the same. One of them was a woman named Claire Hart. She was a college student who went camping with friends near the edge of the forest. Her friends claimed she wandered off after midnight, following a faint dirt trail. When they realized she was gone, they searched for hours, calling her name until morning. Just as the sun was rising, Claire stumbled out of the trees. Her eyes were wide, her lips cracked and pale. She was barefoot, though she had gone in with boots. When asked what happened, she only repeated the same phrase again and again. They wouldn't let me leave. Doctors who examined her said she showed signs of severe dehydration, but she had only been gone a few hours. To her friends, it had been a single night. But to Claire, it felt like weeks. She claimed the trail kept stretching, bending, folding in on itself, as if the forest was alive and trying to trap her. And though she survived, she never entered the woods again. Another case involved a hunter named Joseph Crane. He vanished in 1981, 2 days later. He was found wandering on a highway nearly 50 miles from where he disappeared. His clothes were shredded, his skin covered in scratches. When questioned, Joseph said he had followed a moonlit road in the woods. At first, he thought it was just a shortcut. But then he heard footsteps behind him, heavy, dragging footsteps. Every time he turned, nothing was there. The sound grew louder, closer, until it felt like someone was breathing against the back of his neck. When he finally broke into a run, he claimed the trees themselves shifted, forcing him deeper inside. Remembered black shapes darting between the trunks, watching him with glowing eyes. And then, nothing. His memory after that was gone, as if something had cut it out of his mind. But he ended his statement with a chilling warning. That trail doesn't take you into the forest, it takes you somewhere else. Over time, the Midnight Trail stopped being just a story. It became an urban legend. Parents warned their children, if you see a path in the woods at night, never step on it. Campers dared each other to look for it, but most never returned with proof. Some swore that the trail was not part of this world at all. They claimed it was a doorway, a crossing point, where it led. No one could say for sure. Some said it pulled you into the past, trapping you in the memories of those who died in the forest. Others believed it dragged you into a place between life and death, where voices of the lost whispered endlessly. There were even rumors that the trail was alive, that it wasn't dirt and rock, but something growing, something feeding, because the people who followed it never came back whole. Their minds were fractured, their bodies aged faster, as if time bent differently along that path. Locals began calling it the Road of Borrowed Time. They said the trail would take from you whatever it wanted. Years of your life, pieces of your memory, or your very soul. One old man told a story of seeing his brother walk the trail when they were teenagers. He said his brother vanished into the trees, but weeks later he saw him again, unalive, but standing among the shadows at the edge of the forest, watching silently. The man swore it wasn't really his brother anymore, just something wearing his face. And each time he looked away, the figure was a little closer. So warm and dried and I couldn't do it. And so did the old man's voice. He never spoke again. In recent years, the Midnight Trail has found new attention. It's not from old loggers or hunters, but from the internet. explorers, vloggers, and thrill seekers began chasing the legend, armed with cameras and flashlights. They wanted proof. Some of them may have found it. In 2017, a group of 3 friends uploaded a video to a small YouTube channel. The footage begins with them joking, laughing, holding their phones out as they enter the forest around 11:45 p.m. They film the trees, the silence, the empty ground. But at exactly 12:01 a.m., the camera catches something strange. A narrow trail stretching between the trees, illuminated by nothing but moonlight. The friends go silent. One of them whispers, "It wasn't here before." The group argues about whether to follow it. Eventually, curiosity wins. They walk. The footage becomes shaky as the forest seems to grow darker. At one point, one of the friends asks, "Do you hear that?" A faint whisper can be heard on the audio. At first, it's too soft to understand. The longer they walk, the clearer it becomes. The whisper isn't random. It's calling their names. One by one. The video ends abruptly with the camera dropping to the dirt. The last image is of boots turning toward the trees, and a pair of glowing eyes watching from the darkness. The police later recovered the camera, but none of the 3 friends were ever found. The channel still exists, frozen with that final upload. And the comments section is filled with people claiming they hear more than whispers. Some say they can make out full sentences hidden in the static. Sentences like, "Come closer," or worse, "You're next." Among the rare survivors, one account stands out. It came from a man named Daniel Ross. He was a hiker who disappeared for 3 nights in 2004. When he stumbled back into town, barefoot and half mad, people thought he had gone insane. But his story was unlike anything the locals had ever heard. Daniel claimed he had followed the trail just like the others. At first it felt endless, twisting and circling, always pulling him deeper. But eventually, he reached the end. What he found there was not human. He described a clearing in the woods where the air itself felt heavy, pressing down on him like a weight. In the center stood a figure, tall, thin. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, as though it was made from the forest itself. Daniel swore its eyes glowed faintly, like embers smoldering in the dark. And when it spoke, it did not move its mouth. The words formed inside his head. "You are late." The creature told him he had walked the trail before. Not in this life, but in another. That the trail always brought back the same souls, feeding on them across time. Daniel said he tried to run, but the figure only stretched its long arms outward, and the forest closed in around him. Trees shifted like walls, bending and twisting, sealing him inside. Then, silence. The next thing he remembered was waking up on the roadside miles away, with no idea how he escaped. But he carried a warning. Daniel's eyes were bloodshot, his voice trembling when he said these words. The trail doesn't just take people, it waits. It remembers. And one day it comes looking for you. Not everyone believed the trail was just a strange path in the woods. Some researchers, folklorists, occult historians began piecing together fragments of older legends. What they discovered was chilling. The Midnight Trail wasn't new. It had been spoken of for centuries, under different names. In some native stories, it was called the Hungry Road. In old settler journals, it was referred to as the Devil's Path. And in both cases, the theme was the same. The trail demanded a sacrifice. One folktale told of entire communities who vanished after following the path. It wasn't random. It was ritual. The forest itself, or the thing inside it, needed souls to sustain its existence. Every few decades, the trail would appear more frequently, luring in wanderers, travelers, and the curious. Some claim this was why disappearances came in waves, spiking every 30 or 40 years. If not enough victims were taken, the entity at the end would begin to leave the forest, searching, claiming people from their homes, their cars, even their beds. Locals began to fear that ignoring the trail was just as dangerous as walking it. Because what if the sacrifice wasn't voluntary? What if by refusing to give its souls, the creature would simply take them anyway? There is even a legend of a preacher in the 1800s who tried to banish the trail through prayer. He gathered the town together, leading them in chants at midnight by the forest's edge. At first, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the townsfolk began vanishing. Not into the forest, but right there in front of each other. Swallowed by the air, gone in seconds. The preacher's journal ends with only 3 words scrawled across the page. It needed more. Over time, people living near the forest developed their own ways to protect themselves from the trail. Superstitions turned into rituals. Some believed carrying salt in your pocket would keep the path from appearing before you. Others swore by iron, a nail in your boot or a knife in your hand, to ward off whatever called from the shadows. Certain families kept small jars of ash above their doorways, said to confuse the whispers that lured people outside. And then there were offerings. Locals would leave coins, bread, or even drops of blood at the forest's edge, hoping the trail would be satisfied and pass them by. But these protections rarely lasted, because when the trail wanted someone, it took them. One man told the story of his grandfather who never went near the woods after dark. Every night, he would place a bowl of milk at the tree line as an offering. For years, it seemed to work, till one night the bowl was empty before he even set it down. The old man froze, staring into the trees. Something was already waiting. The next morning he was gone. All that remained was the overturned bowl, cracked in the dirt. Another family painted strange symbols in chalk across their porch, meant to confuse the creature that walked the trail. It worked for a while, till the chalk began appearing inside the house, drawn across their walls, their floors, even their mirrors. No matter how many times they cleaned it, the markings returned. As if the trail itself was reminding them, "You can't keep me out." And so, the belief grew that no ritual, no charm, no offering could stop it forever. The trail wasn't just part of the forest, it was part of you once you saw it. It followed, it waited, and it always found a way back. The most disturbing modern account comes not from hikers or campers, but from professionals. In 2019, a small Cirque rescue team was sent into the forest. After a teenager went missing near the old highway, the team consisted of 6 people. They were experienced, equipped with radios, dogs, and GPS trackers. At 11:50 p.m., their recordings showed them combing the woods. Everything seemed normal until the dogs began to whine. The handlers reported that the animals refused to move forward, pulling against their leashes, staring into the dark. Then at exactly midnight, one of the rescuers shouted. A trail had appeared ahead of them. The footage from a body camera shows the dirt path glowing faintly under the moonlight, stretching deep into the forest. Despite hesitation, the team decided to follow it. At first, nothing unusual happened. They walked in silence, marking trees with spray paint to track their way back. But when they turned around after 20 minutes, every mark was gone. The trees were clean, untouched. The trail behind them had shifted, bending into directions that none of their compasses could follow. Static filled their radios. One by one, the voices on the line grew distorted. The last clear message captured was chilling. It's calling our names, and then silence. Hours later, only 2 members stumbled back into town. They were disoriented, bleeding from scratches, their eyes wide with terror. When asked what happened, they refused to answer at first. Finally, one of them whispered, "We were 6 when we entered, but there were 7 walking out." To this day, no one knows what he meant. But the other 4 rescuers were never seen again. The most unsettling detail about the trail is how quietly it hides within official records. Police reports rarely mention it directly. Instead, they call it lost person cases or wandering from the search zone. But between the lines, the pattern is obvious. Hikers vanish most often near the forest's eastern ridge, always at night, always without struggle. In 2021, 2 brothers, Matthew and Ryan Cole, were camping near the ridge. Their sister, who stayed behind in the tent, reported hearing footsteps outside just past midnight. At first, she thought her brothers had gone to relieve themselves, but the steps didn't sound right. Too many feet too close together. When she finally stepped out, the clearing was empty. Their backpacks, shoes, and food were still inside the tent. But her brothers were gone. A search party was launched immediately. For 3 nights, authorities combed the area. In each night, rescuers reported seeing the same thing, a narrow trail fading in and out, as if it were breathing. One officer swore he heard laughter echoing along it. Another said he saw shadows moving, but not in the direction the flashlights pointed. They moved sideways, against the trees, as though cast by something unseen. No evidence of the brothers was ever recovered. Only a single boot was found, neatly placed at the start of the trail. Not torn, not dirty, as if someone had set it there deliberately. When the missing persons report was released to the public, the trail was never mentioned. But the locals knew, and they still whisper that the Cole brothers are not dead. They are still walking, somewhere along that midnight road. One of the few survivors who ever spoke publicly about the trail was a woman named Emily Vargas. In 2015, she and her boyfriend went hiking in the same forest where the Cole brothers disappeared. They had planned to spend just 1 night. But at midnight, Emily woke to find her boyfriend missing. His shoes, his jacket, his flashlight, all gone. Panicked, she searched the clearing. That's when she saw it. A dirt trail, cutting through the trees where there had been nothing hours before. She swore she heard his voice calling from down the path. Not screaming, not panicked, just calmly calling her name again and again. Against her better judgment, she followed. What felt like hours, she walked. But the voice never got closer. It always sounded just a few feet ahead. Her flashlight flickered the deeper she went, until it finally died. In the darkness, she realized something chilling. The voice had changed. It was still her boyfriend's tone. But the words were different. Instead of calling her name, it whispered, "Keep going, almost there." Emily said she began to run, terrified, crashing through branches until the trees opened into a small clearing. At the center was her boyfriend, or at least something wearing his shape. It stood completely still, smiling too widely, its eyes empty and glassy. When she screamed, it tilted its head as if curious. Then dozens of whispers rose from the forest around her. Different voices, different tones, all murmuring in unison. "Stay." Emily blacked out. When she came to, it was morning. She was lying at the forest's edge, clothes torn, hands bleeding from scratches. Her boyfriend was never found. And to this day, she refuses to enter any wooded area, no matter how small. When asked in an interview what she remembered most, Emily gave a single answer. The smile. It wasn't his. It never was. In 1998, Deputy Sheriff named Mark Hanley filed one of the strangest private reports ever linked to the trail. Officially, his statement never made it into police records, but years later his daughter discovered a notebook among his belongings, hidden in a locked drawer. The entries describe the night he was sent to investigate a call about suspicious lights in the forest. Hanley wrote that it was just past midnight when he parked near the ridge. He expected teenagers, maybe campers with lanterns. Instead, he found a trail, narrow, dirt-packed, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Hanley admitted he felt drawn to it. He walked only a few steps before realizing something was terribly wrong. His flashlight beam seemed to bend, as though the light itself didn't want to go forward. And then he heard the voices. Not screams, not cries for help, but laughter. Children's laughter. It echoed from both sides of the trail, though his radio confirmed he was completely alone. He tried calling for backup, but the radio only hissed with static. When he turned to leave, the patrol car was no longer visible. Only trees. Panic set in. Hanley fired his weapon into the air, hoping the sound would ground him. But instead of a gunshot echo, he heard something else. A voice. Deep, distorted, whispering directly into his ear. Too late. He sprinted back the way he came, crashing through the trees until he finally reached the road. His car was right there, headlights still on. He had only been gone for 20 minutes. But according to his watch, nearly 6 hours had passed. Hanley never told his department what happened, but his last journal entry reads like a confession. I didn't find the missing people. I think they found me. Over the years, a darker theory began to spread among locals. The trail doesn't just take people, it replaces them. There are stories of hikers and campers who returned after days missing, only for their families to notice something was wrong. At first it was small. Their voices sounded slightly different, flatter without emotion. They forgot names they should have known. Some even laughed at the wrong times, as though they didn't understand how humans were supposed to act. One boy who disappeared at age 10 was found wandering out of the forest 3 nights later. His mother embraced him, sobbing with relief. But when she looked into his eyes, she froze. He smiled too widely, his teeth clenched as if forced. And in a voice far deeper than a child's, he whispered, "You shouldn't have called me back." The boy stopped speaking after that, sitting in silence until he was eventually taken to a state facility. Doctors labeled it trauma, but his family swore that whatever came out of the forest was not their son. Another case involved a man named Lucas Hayes. He returned after vanishing for 2 weeks. At first, he seemed normal, but within days, his wife noticed he no longer slept. Every night, she would wake to find him standing at the window, staring toward the forest. When she asked what he was looking at, he finally turned and answered, "They're still walking." A week later, Lucas was gone again. This time, no one ever saw him return. One of the most dedicated researchers of the trail was a man named Dr. Adrian Cole. He wasn't a hiker or thrill seeker. He was a historian, fascinated by the strange patterns of disappearances that spanned decades. For nearly 20 years, he collected files, police reports, folklore, and eyewitness testimonies. His notes filled entire boxes. He even mapped the sightings, drawing a web of where the trail had appeared. What he discovered was haunting. The path never formed randomly. Every time, it appeared near the site of a disappearance from years before, as if the forest was retracing its steps. In 2010, Dr. Cole began giving quiet lectures at universities, warning that the trail was a predator, not a myth. Most dismissed him, but his obsession only grew. By 2016, his journals became increasingly erratic. He wrote about dreams of walking the trail, of voices whispering his name, claimed he could smell the damp soil of the path even while in his home. And then in March of that year, he disappeared. Neighbors reported seeing him leave his house just before midnight, carrying only a lantern in his journal. He never came back. Weeks later, searchers found his journal propped against a hollow tree deep in the forest. The last entry chilled everyone who read it. The trail doesn't appear to me anymore. I peer to it. For decades, people wondered what really waited at the end of the trail. Was it just a forest trick? A hallucination? Or something much worse? One theory, pieced together from survivor accounts and fragments of folklore, suggested a terrifying truth. The trail is not a path at all. It is a lure. Like the glowing light of an anglerfish, it shows itself only to draw people deeper, guiding them toward what feeds on them. Survivors often describe the same thing: reaching a clearing, hearing whispers, seeing figures that looked familiar. But those figures were never real. They were bait. Reflections pulled from the victim's mind, stitched together to keep them walking willingly. The deeper they went, the more the trail consumed. It's not just their bodies, but their memories, their time, their identity. That is why survivors always came back different. They weren't whole anymore. Something had taken pieces of them. And for those who never came back, it wasn't because they were lost. It was because they had been claimed. One old legend from the 1800s described the trail as the tongue of the forest. It licked people clean of who they were, swallowing what it needed, leaving behind only shadows. And sometimes, if the forest wanted, it spit them back out. But they were never the same again. The most disturbing account came from a group of 3 campers in 2019. They were night hiking when the trail appeared in front of them. First it looked normal, a dirt path lit faintly by the moon. But the deeper they walked, the quieter the world became. No insects, no wind, not even the sound of their own footsteps. They said it felt like walking through a dream. The path bent sharply, leading to a clearing. And that's when they saw it. Rows of people, standing silently among the trees. Faces pale, eyes wide, unmoving. Some wore modern clothing. Others looked like they had stepped out of another century. Every missing person the town had ever whispered about. They were all there, but they weren't alive. They weren't dead either. They were just. One camper swore he saw his own missing brother among them, staring blankly ahead, lips moving as if repeating a word he couldn't hear. Then, in unison, all of them turned their heads toward the group and smiled. That was enough. The 3 men ran, not looking back until the trail spat them out near the highway. 2 of them refused to speak about it again. The third, trembling, gave one final statement before vanishing from town entirely. The trail doesn't lead anywhere. It brings you to them. And if you stay long enough, you become one of them. Since then, more have gone missing. The forest still waits. The trail still appears. And if you ever see it glowing faintly at midnight, you'll have a choice to make. Turn back. Or take the path. Just remember, no one who walks it ever truly comes back.